All right, next up for a gear review is a Pioneer A25 fully automatic turntable. These were manufactured between 70 and 71, belt drive. They do operate, and I'll go through the functions of this in a minute here. Now, this is not the cleanest representation of this that I've worked on. This is just one that happened to come across my bench. So I typically don't like to do gear reviews on stuff that's not in pretty good cosmetic shape. And this is in decent shape, but the dust cover is pretty scratched up. Luckily, the lighting in my office is crappy, so you may or may not be able to see that. I can't really tell from the camera. But I'll go through the features and functions of this here in a minute. Manual or full auto. Dimensions. I couldn't find them online, so I did a real quick measurement, 17.5 by 14 by 6.5. So not a gigantic turntable, but still will take up quite a bit of real estate because, you know, these wooden plinth Pioneers, they were pretty big. I dig the look. I really like the look of these, but they are kind of they're on the large side. In terms of the series that this kind of fit into, so, you know, I had a hard time finding some catalogs to show the entire product lineup. But one that I pulled down from 1970 had the PL6, which I think is a cool turntable. I'd love to find one to work on. They kind of command a premium. I think they're neat looking. I don't know if they're great turntables or not. I've never really researched them, gone into it that far. But you had the PL6, PL41, which is I think one of the best turntables that I've ever probably come across in terms of just a simple tone arm motor. You know, I think they are very highly regarded. I mean, you can find modern turntables that are better. You can even find vintage turntables that are better. But for what you pay for one of those 41s, they're great. PLA35s, PL30, which I've worked on a couple of PL30s, and they're slightly different. I think those are only. Are those full auto? No, I think, you know, I don't even remember on the PL30. I know I've worked on a couple of them. I may even have a video out there of one. I don't know. And this is the old PL30, not the modern version of the PL30. And I think there are actually two different versions of the PL30. And then the PL A25, which you see here. So in terms of what's going on with this turntable, it's what I call like I referenced earlier, the big plinth Pioneer. It's a belt drive. You know, in this series, I'm going to say, you know, these turntables sound good, right? It's nowhere near the quality of a PL41, but they're serviceable turntables. The automatic function, that mechanism, is very clunky though, very loud, which is something that I really don't like about them. So, you know, this is one of those turntables that I think are just okay. Operation is pretty easy. So let's look at what we have going on here. I need to remove my little twist tie. So looking at the turntable, right, some of the things that you have to be aware of. And also I'll kind of cover what to look out for as I'm doing the functions and features. And some of these are going to be true of most of the big plinth Pioneers. So number one, understand that the counterweight, and I don't even, this may be backwards. I don't know. I'll have to look at a picture. I may have to move this around. But the counterweight is not marked. So having a scale is pretty important when you set the tracking force on these. The tone arm elevator guide, if this is broken or if it gets bent, right, you may have issues with it. This is also a piece of metal. Well, I think on this one it's a piece of metal. I know on the 41s it was. But some of these it'll be rubber. It'll cover a piece of metal that's actually riveted to the base here. So if that rivet breaks, you'll have a guide that kind of flops around a little bit. It's not level. This one is actually designed a little bit differently. It has an arm that comes up and hooks, so this is a different design here. It may just be a single piece of wire. I don't even know. Straight tone arm, angled head shell, Luckily, when I got this, and there's actually a service video on this one, so you'll see the state I got it in. There's a backstory behind it, and I'll explain all that to you. Luckily, when I got it, it didn't have a head shell, but there's a head shell for sale on eBay that I was able to pick up. So it has an angled head shell, standard tone arm elevator up and down for manual mode, if you are so inclined to use that. This slider here goes to manual, 30, 25, or 17, so the size of the record. The functions are pretty straightforward. You move this lever to start. It'll start the automatic function, I guess, right? It'll move the tone arm over, drop it in position, play it, get to the end of the record, come back. It does have a repeat lock, so you can have it just keep going and going and going. Here's the speed selector. It does have a little 45 adapter, but I've got 100 of these, so I just kind of throw one on it that's not marked. So it's really, really simple to use, really, really simple to hook up. Again, the only gotcha is you need to have a scale to set that weight right there. The head shell is pretty interesting on this, so I'll show you what's going on here. So notice on the head shell there's this center screw. So what happens is there's a bracket that the cartridge sits on, right? And I don't know if you can really see that. I'm going to try to get in here. But the cartridge sits on a bracket, and you can slide this bracket back and forth, right? So you can set overhang on it. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so other than that, I mean, it's just a basic turntable. Just hit start, it does its thing, and then at the end of the record, it comes back. Adjustment can be made right back here. You pop that little rubber stopper there and make your like auto return adjustment, or drop point adjustment, I should say, for that. One of the gotchas, or some of the gotchas on these. So if you're looking for one of these to either repair, or you just see one on eBay and you like it, the feet on these tend to flatten and then turn into like hockey pucks. So, and I cover that a little bit in the video, and I'm kind of like the service video, I'm talking about whether or not I'm going to replace them or what I'm going to do. I opted to just keep them in place, and whoever buys it, if I'm at the shop when they buy it, I'll just advise them to buy some vibropods just to kind of put up underneath there. Sorry for the quick edit on there. My battery just started flashing saying it was going to die any second, so I had to pop a new one in here. So I think I was talking about the feet and vibropods, and I would just advise the owner to put some new feet on it. Let's see what else is going on with this. What else do you need to look out for? So naturally, make sure the head shell's there. You can always get an aftermarket, but it's best to have it's best to have an OEM. Hinges. So this has kind of a locking release for the hinge. So you have a little metal tab here, and you bend that down, and then you kind of slide the dust cover this way to remove it. Other gotchas on this. No, I can't think of anything else. I will say that sometimes on these, so the auto return mechanism on this is it's electric. It's not electronic in nature, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain. But sometimes some of the contacts involved with the automatic start and stop, they will, it'll arc a little bit, right? Where the contacts are touching each other. Sometimes it will actually, I've seen it where it wears a hole in the contacts, I guess is probably the best way to put it, or burns a hole through the contacts, right? So sometimes if you get one of these, you might hear some arcing, right? So you just have to go and up underneath and figure out what's going on with that. I've noticed that on maybe one or two that I've worked on. But again, the automatic function on this is pretty noisy, so it's kind of hard to distinguish between what's just gear noise, right? In terms of what you would run into on one of these, it's the typical hardened grease. Now I did have to replace the power switch on this, and again, that's part of the service video. So you want to be aware of the power switch, and then replacing that is super simple. And you can find replacements that are like less than I mean, with shipping, it'd be like probably 15 bucks, but the part itself, I buy them 10 at a time because I can use them in a lot of different things. You know, the parts themselves are, you know, $2 or $3. So let's see. I think that's it in terms of what I wanted to talk about as far as the gotchas and the things to look out for. In terms of serviceability, pretty easy. Oh, another common, you know, fault on this would be bad RCA cables. And then finding the right belt, getting the right size, and getting the speed adjusted can be a pain, because there are no more OEM belts. There are no manufacturers making the exact size, so you kind of have to, I always have to go through 3 or 4 belts, and then I usually have to do a little bit of adjusting in terms of the diameter of the motor spindle, right? So a little bit of clear fingernail polish, or maybe removing a little bit of material to get it dialed in close enough to where you audibly cannot tell that there's a speed issue. So I think that's it. Now, in terms of price on these aren't commanding a high price nowadays. To get one that's restored, I mean, I've seen them in the box on eBay with all the manuals, go for like $300 shipped. I mean, they're a solid turntable once you get it up and running. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a cool looking turntable. They're not all that valuable. So probably around $300 to get one, you know, in this condition. You're looking at maybe $250, right? Ish around there. Again, there's not a real big spread in terms of pricing on these. So if you get one working, maybe some of the veneer is going to be chipped off, which is another common issue with these. Now this one, the veneer is in perfect condition. The dust cover is a little bit rough. There was a crack here because of crappy packaging, but yeah, so maybe $250, somewhere around there. To get one for parts, now this one was, I paid like 85 bucks for it. The person that shipped it basically threw it in a box. So luckily, it did sustain damage to the dust cover. There was damage to the tone arm stand that I had to sort out. The platter had come off, and it did scratch the top a little bit. So, you know, I paid like 85 bucks shipped, but at the end of the day, I said, hey, I you know, this thing is not in the shape that it was advertised. So I worked it out with the seller. Basically, I got it for nothing, because it would have cost more to ship it back, and, you know, lesson learned by the seller. But I did have to buy the head shell. So I'm into this total head shell, cartridge, belt. I'm still into it for about $100, right? Which is what you can expect if you are going to pick one of these up as a parts unit, probably around $100, right? Make sure it has the cartridge, the head shell. This came with the original cartridge, but I did pull it off. Make sure the dust cover is intact. Make sure all the little parts and pieces are here. That tone arm elevator is there, but still, you can probably get one of these shipped for around $100. And the cost of shipping something this heavy, I didn't weigh this, but it's a pretty heavy turntable. I mean, the seller's probably only making like 30 bucks, right? By the time they package it and insure it and all that stuff and ship it to you. Except for the seller that I bought this from, because they just threw it in a box. And luckily it made it to me without a whole lot of damage, but enough to where I did not want to keep it. So they gave me my money back, which is good. So I think that's going to wrap it up for the A25. Again, decent turntable, cool look, fairly reliable, fairly easy to repair. Now, if the automatic function, the gearing in there is damaged, then it's a whole different ballgame, because, and I think I referenced in the service video, there was a website I used to use called Organ Donor Parts. They no longer sell turntable parts, but you could just go to the website and look up this turntable and find a bunch of parts for it. So if there was a cog missing, or a gear missing, or a switch missing, or whatever missing, even cosmetic things like knobs and switches, like covers and things like that, you could find them there. But that website they closed it, I think, 2 years ago. So they no longer sell parts. So now you're at the mercy of eBay, right? So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up on the A25. Good turntable. You get it at a decent price. As always, if you like what you see, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.